The harsh crack of a bullwhip sliced through the midnight air as Katherine Greene stumbled through the dense underbrush, her torn skirts catching on thorny branches while blood trickled down her bare feet. Escape had not come easily, but after 3 months of captivity in Edgar Blackstone's isolated ranch house, she'd seized her only chance when he had fallen into a drunken stupor following one of his violent rages. The year was 1876, and in this remote corner of the Wyoming territory, law existed only as a distant concept. Katherine had arrived from Boston just 4 months prior, answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher position in the frontier town of Willow Creek. Instead, she'd been abducted by Blackstone on her journey west, a man who claimed he needed a wife and didn't care whether she came willingly. "Girl," Blackstone's drunken voice bellowed through the trees behind her. "You'll regret this. Ain't nowhere to run that I won't find you." Katherine choked back a sob, pushing herself harder despite the pain lancing through her feet. The light of the full moon offered just enough illumination to avoid the worst obstacles, but she had no destination beyond away. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, and the distant howl of coyotes only heightened her terror. She had no idea how long she'd been running when her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her tumbling down a steep embankment. Pain exploded through her ankle as she landed awkwardly, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Crouching at the bottom of the ravine, she strained her ears for any sign of pursuit. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the gentle babble of a nearby stream. Then came the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, approaching quickly. Katherine pressed herself against the earthen wall of the ravine, praying the shadows would conceal her. The hoofbeats slowed, and she heard the distinct sound of a man dismounting. Had Blackstone found her already? "Hello." A man's voice called out, different from Blackstone's coarse growl. This voice was deep but gentler, with a slight southern drawl. "Is someone there? I heard something fall." Katherine remained silent, fear keeping her immobile. "I ain't looking for trouble," the voice continued. "Just riding night patrol for the Double G Ranch when I heard a commotion." A lantern flared to life above, casting golden light down into the ravine. Katherine tried to press deeper into the shadows, but the movement sent a sharp pain through her injured ankle, and she couldn't suppress a gasp. The lantern lowered, and Katherine found herself looking up into the face of a man, perhaps 5 or 6 years her senior. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: denim pants, a simple button-up shirt beneath a leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his features. Still, she could make out strong cheekbones, a day's worth of stubble, and eyes that reflected concern rather than malice. "Madam," he said, taking in her disheveled appearance with widening eyes. "Are you hurt?" "Please," Katherine whispered, her voice cracking with fear. "Don't tell anyone you saw me. He'll kill me if he finds me." The cowboy's expression hardened. "Who'll kill you?" When she didn't answer immediately, he carefully made his way down the embankment, moving slowly as if approaching a frightened animal. "My name's Adam Gallagher. I work for the Double G. Whatever trouble you're in, maybe I can help." "He'll come looking," Katherine said, panic rising in her chest again. "Edgar Blackstone. He kept me locked in his house. Said I was his wife, but I never—" Her voice broke. Adam Gallagher's face transformed with recognition and disgust. "Blackstone," he spat. "That explains plenty." He knelt a respectful distance away. "Madam, if you're running from Blackstone, then you've got friends at the Double G. My boss, George Gordon, has no love for that man. We can offer you protection." "You don't understand," Katherine insisted, struggling to her feet only to cry out when she put weight on her injured ankle. "He won't stop. He said he'd kill anyone who tried to help me." Adam moved forward, catching her before she fell. "Easy now," he said, his touch gentle but firm. That ankle needs tending." He paused, then said with quiet conviction, "Miss, I don't know your story yet, but I promise you this. You'll never go back there, not while I'm breathing." Something in his tone made Katherine look up sharply. There was a certainty in his eyes that penetrated the fog of her fear, a steadfastness she hadn't encountered since coming west. "Can you ride?" he asked. Katherine nodded weakly. "But he'll be looking for me. He has men who work for him." "Blackstone's ranch is to the east," Adam said, helping her up the embankment. "We're heading west, and we've got a good head start. The Double G is about 5 miles from here." At the top of the ravine stood a magnificent chestnut gelding who nickered softly as they approached. Adam helped Katherine mount, then swung up behind her. The solid warmth of him at her back should have made her uncomfortable after her ordeal, but instead, it offered the first sense of security she'd felt in months. "I don't even know your name, madam," Adam said as he urged the horse into a brisk walk, careful not to jostle her too much. "Katherine," she replied. "Katherine Greene. I came west to be a teacher." "Well, Miss Greene," Adam said, steering the horse onto a barely visible trail through the trees, "let's get you somewhere safe. Then we can figure out what comes next." As they rode through the moonlit wilderness, Katherine allowed herself to sag slightly against Adam's chest, exhaustion finally catching up with her. For the first time since her ordeal began, she dared to hope that there might indeed be a next. The Double G Ranch emerged from the darkness like a fortress of salvation. Nestled in a protected valley, the sprawling main house and surrounding buildings glowed with warm lamplight despite the late hour. As they approached, Katherine could make out several men moving with purpose around the property, ranch hands working the night shift or standing guard. "We've been having trouble with cattle rustlers," Adam explained, noting her tension at the sight of so many men. "Everyone's on high alert." A figure stepped out from the shadow of the barn, rifle at the ready. "Identify yourself. It's Adam Gallagher," he called back. "I've got someone who needs help." The figure lowered his weapon and approached. As he drew closer, Katherine could see he was an older man with a shock of white hair and a weathered face. "George," Adam said respectfully. "This is Miss Katherine Greene. She's escaped from Edgar Blackstone's place." George Gordon's expression darkened as he took in Katherine's condition. "Bring her inside, quick. Martha will see to her." Within moments, Katherine found herself ushered into the warmth of the main house, where George's wife Martha, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, took charge with brisk efficiency. "Good heavens, child," Martha exclaimed, guiding Katherine to a chair by the fire. "You're half frozen and bleeding. Adam, fetch hot water and my medicine kit. George will need some of Emma's clothes. They should fit Miss Greene well enough." Katherine felt oddly detached as gentle hands cleaned her cuts, wrapped her sprained ankle, and helped her change into clean, dry clothing. The horrors of the past months and the terror of her escape had left her numb, operating on instinct alone. Now, surrounded by kindness, the protective walls she'd built began to crumble. "He'll come looking for me," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "He said no one would help me, that everyone in the territory owed him or feared him." Martha's hand stilled on Katherine's tangled hair. "Edgar Blackstone is a vile man, but he's not as powerful as he thinks. This house has stood against worse threats." George returned to the room, his face grim. "I've sent 2 men to town to alert Sheriff Wilson. Blackstone stepped over the line too many times. The rest of the boys are on watch. No one approaches without us knowing." Adam hadn't left Katherine's side, hovering near the door with concern etched across his features. "Miss Greene was meant to be a teacher," he told George. "Sounds like Blackstone intercepted her before she reached Willow Creek." "Is that so?" George exchanged a look with Martha. The town's still without a teacher. Mayor Thompson's been trying to fill that position for nearly a year now. Katherine looked up, hope flickering briefly. The position might still be open. I have credentials from Boston. My letters and belongings were in my trunk, but Blackstone. She faltered. Stole them, I expect, George finished grimly. Well, we can sort that out in time. For now, you need rest. I'll stand watch outside her door, Adam offered immediately. No need to be dramatic, son, Martha said with a small smile. She'll stay in Emma's old room. It's right next to ours, and no one's getting past this house full of cowboys. She patted Katherine's hand. You're safe here, dear. Yet as Katherine was led to a small but comfortable bedroom, she couldn't shake the dread that had become her constant companion. Blackstone's words echoed in her mind. There's nowhere in this territory you can hide from me. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her bandaged hands. Despite her exhaustion, sleep seemed impossible. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Miss Greene. Adam's voice came through the wood. Just wanted to let you know I'll be right outside if you need anything. Katherine crossed to the door but didn't open it. You don't have to do that, Mr. Gallagher. Mrs. Gordon said. I know what Mrs. Gordon said, he interrupted gently. But I'd rest easier knowing I was keeping watch, just for tonight. Tears pricked Katherine's eyes at this small kindness. Thank you, she whispered. Get some rest, Miss Greene. Tomorrow will be better. Katherine returned to the bed and, to her surprise, fell into an exhausted slumber almost immediately. For the first time in months, her sleep was deep and dreamless. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, Katherine lay frozen in confusion before the events of the previous night came rushing back. She sat up cautiously, testing her ankle. It was sore but functional. A dress had been laid out for her, simple but well-made, in a soft blue that reminded her of the dresses she'd worn in Boston before everything changed. She dressed slowly, appreciating the simple luxury of privacy and clean clothing. When she opened the bedroom door, she found Adam slumped in a chair outside, his hat tipped over his eyes. He startled awake at the sound, hand instinctively going to the revolver at his hip before recognition dawned. Miss Greene, he said, quickly removing his hat. How are you feeling this morning? Better, she admitted. You didn't have to stay all night. He stood, stretching subtly. I said I would. The simplicity of his response touched her. A man who kept his word was rare in her recent experience. Breakfast's ready, Martha called from downstairs. Come down while it's hot. The kitchen was bustling with activity as ranch hands came and went, all stopping to nod respectfully to Katherine. She was struck by the easy camaraderie and genuine concern these strangers showed. It was as if her arrival had united them against a common enemy. Sheriff's riding out to Blackstone's today, George announced as he entered the kitchen. Wants to talk to you first, Miss Greene, if you're up to it. Katherine's stomach twisted with anxiety, but she nodded. Of course. Sheriff Thomas Wilson arrived an hour later, a tall, lean man with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He listened without interruption as Katherine recounted her ordeal. How Blackstone and two of his men had intercepted her stagecoach, claiming they were escorting her to Willow Creek, only to take her to his isolated ranch. How he'd kept her locked in a room, alternating between attempting to court her and flying into drunken rages. How she'd finally escaped when he'd passed out after drinking heavily. This ain't the first complaint about Blackstone, Sheriff Wilson said when she'd finished, but it's the most serious. Problem is without evidence. You have her testimony, Adam interjected, anger evident in his voice. You have her injuries. And Blackstone has friends in the territorial government, the sheriff countered. I'll confront him, make it clear we know what he's done, but unless we find Miss Greene's belongings at his property or get a confession. So he gets away with it, Adam said bitterly. Sheriff Wilson sighed heavily. I didn't say that. I'm just warning that this won't be simple. He turned to Katherine. Miss Greene, would you recognize the men who helped him abduct you? Katherine nodded. One was tall with a scar across his cheek. The other was younger, maybe 20, with red hair. Sounds like Joe Hawkins and Billy Ray, the sheriff muttered. Blackstone's hired guns. He stood. I'll ride out there today, see what I can find. Meanwhile, Miss Greene should stay here where it's safe. After the sheriff departed, a heavy silence fell over the room. Katherine stared at her hands, feeling the weight of everyone's concern. I never should have come west, she whispered. My father warned me it would be dangerous for a woman alone. You came to teach, Martha said firmly. That's a noble calling, not a mistake. And Blackstone's actions aren't a reflection on you or the West, Adam added. There are good and bad folks everywhere. George cleared his throat. If you're still interested in teaching, I could ride into Willow Creek tomorrow, speak with Mayor Thompson. The town's only 8 miles from here, close enough that you could stay with us until you're comfortable living in town. Katherine looked up in surprise. You do that? After bringing all this trouble to your door? Trouble found you, not the other way around, George said simply. Besides, my boys could use some schooling. He gestured to the ranch hands gathered around the table. Half of them can barely sign their names. This brought chuckles from the men and a small smile to Katherine's face. Think about it, Martha urged. No need to decide today. As the day progressed, Katherine found herself drawn into the rhythm of ranch life. Martha welcomed her help with household tasks, seeming to understand that keeping busy was the best medicine for a troubled mind. When Katherine's ankle began to ache, Martha insisted she rest on the porch, where she could enjoy the spectacular view of mountains rising beyond the pastures. That was where Adam found her in the late afternoon, returning from his day's work with dust covering his clothes and fatigue evident in his movements. Still, he smiled when he saw her, the expression transforming his weathered face. Mind if I join you? He asked, removing his hat. Katherine gestured to the empty chair beside her. Please. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the western sky begin its evening transformation. I never thanked you properly, Katherine finally said, for finding me, for bringing me here. Adam shook his head slightly. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. No, Katherine said with quiet certainty. They wouldn't have. She hesitated before continuing. Blackstone told me I was a fool to expect help. He said men out here were just like him, taking what they wanted without asking. Adam's hands tightened on his hat. Blackstone's wrong about most things, but especially that. Sure, there are bad men everywhere, but most folks out here understand that we survive by looking out for each other. He glanced at her. That's why teaching is so important, helps build community, gives children a chance at something better. Is that why Mr. Gordon offered to speak to the mayor, building community? A smile touched Adam's lips. Partly. Though the Gordons lost their daughter Emma 5 years ago, typhoid, having you here, well, I think it does their hearts good. Katherine hadn't considered this. I wouldn't want to be a replacement for their daughter. Not a replacement, Adam clarified. Just a reminder that life goes on, that good things can still happen. He stood. I should clean up before supper. Martha doesn't tolerate dirty cowboys at her table. As he walked away, Katherine found herself watching him with new interest. There was something compelling about Adam Gallagher, a quiet strength that didn't demand attention, but commanded respect nonetheless. Sheriff Wilson returned the following day, his expression grim. Blackstone claims you were there willingly. he reported to Katherine as they all gathered in the Gordons' sitting room. Says you agreed to be his housekeeper, then tried to rob him before running off. That's a lie, Katherine exclaimed. I know, the sheriff said, raising a placating hand. But his story's got just enough plausibility to make this difficult. I searched the place but couldn't find your trunk or papers. He probably burned them, Adam muttered. Likely, the sheriff agreed, but I did find something interesting. That red-headed boy, Billy Ray, got nervous when I started asking specific questions. He might be persuaded to talk, given the right incentive. What kind of incentive? George asked. The kind that involves not swinging for kidnapping, Sheriff Wilson said dryly. I'll work on him. Meanwhile, I've put out word about Blackstone's claims. Nobody's believing his version. His reputation's too well established. But without evidence, he walks free, Adam concluded bitterly. The sheriff nodded reluctantly. For now, but he knows we're watching. And Miss Greene, Mayor Thompson's mighty interested in meeting you. Seems Willow Creek's still desperate for a teacher. After the sheriff left, George turned to Katherine. What do you think? Feel up to riding into town tomorrow to meet the mayor? Katherine considered this. Part of her wanted to flee back east to the safety of Boston and her family, but another part, a stronger part than she'd realized, rebelled against being driven away by fear. Yes, she decided. I'd like that very much. That evening, she found herself once again on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. The immensity of it still took her breath away, so different from Boston's narrow views between buildings. The door opened behind her, and Adam stepped out. Mind some company? I'd welcome it, she replied honestly. He settled beside her, offering a tin cup. Coffee. Martha says you take it with just a touch of sugar. Katherine accepted the cup gratefully. Your employers are remarkable people. More like family than employers, Adam corrected. I came to work here when I was 17, not much more than a boy. They've taught me everything worth knowing. How long ago was that? 8 years this August. He gazed out at the darkness. I was running from some trouble back in Texas. Nothing like what you've been through, but enough that I needed a fresh start. The Gordons gave me that, no questions asked. Katherine sipped her coffee. Is that why you stopped to help me? Paying forward their kindness? Adam considered this. Maybe partly, but honestly, Miss Greene. When I heard you fall, I just acted on instinct. Didn't think about it until later. He paused. I'm glad I found you, though. Glad you're safe. The simple sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the coffee. So am I, Mr. Gallagher. Adam, he corrected gently. Out here, formality feels like putting on airs. Then I'm Katherine, she replied, or Kate as my family calls me. Kate, he repeated as if testing the sound of it. It suits you. They talked late into the evening, Katherine sharing stories of her life in Boston and her journey west. Adam recounting tales of ranch life and the characters he'd encountered. By the time they reluctantly parted for the night, Katherine realized she'd gone hours without thinking of Blackstone or her captivity. It was a small victory, but significant. The next morning, George and Adam accompanied Katherine to Willow Creek. The small frontier town was exactly as she had imagined when answering the advertisement in Boston. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a modest steeple, and scattered houses extending outward. Despite its rustic appearance, there was a sense of purpose and pride evident in the well-maintained storefronts and the industrious activity of its citizens. Mayor Thompson, a portly, enthusiastic man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, practically bounded from his office when they entered the town hall. Miss Greene, what a pleasure, what a pleasure indeed. We had given up hope of securing a teacher this term. He pumped her hand energetically. Sheriff Wilson informed me of your unfortunate experience with Blackstone. Terrible business. But rest assured, the citizens of Willow Creek will ensure your safety and comfort. Katherine was overwhelmed by his enthusiasm, but found herself responding to his genuine warmth. I'm still interested in the position if it remains available. Available? My dear lady, it has been desperately vacant for nearly a year. Our children are growing ignorant while we wait. He gestured to a door across the hall. The schoolhouse is just there. Would you care to inspect it? The schoolroom was simple but adequate. Rows of wooden desks facing a teacher's desk and blackboard, windows providing good light, and a small stove for winter heating. Katherine could immediately envision herself teaching here, helping shape the future of this frontier community. It's perfect, she said sincerely. Excellent. When can you start? Monday next. We have 12 children of school age at present, ranging from 6 to 16 years. The position pays $30 monthly, plus room and board. The mayor hesitated. Though given recent events, perhaps boarding with a family would be preferable to living alone. Miss Greene is welcome to stay at the Double G until she's settled, George interjected. It's not too far for daily travel. Even better, Mayor Thompson exclaimed. Now about your credentials. Sheriff Wilson mentioned there was some difficulty with your documentation. Katherine tensed, but Adam spoke up. Miss Greene's papers were stolen when she was abducted. But she's demonstrated her education and character to us. I'd vouch for her qualifications myself. The mayor nodded thoughtfully. Under normal circumstances, we'd require formal credentials. However, these are hardly normal circumstances and our need is great. He turned to Katherine. A provisional appointment, then. If your teaching proves satisfactory, and I have every confidence it will formalize the arrangement. Relief washed over Katherine. Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I won't disappoint you. As they left the town hall, Katherine felt a surge of hope stronger than anything she'd experienced since her ordeal began. She had a purpose again, a future to look toward rather than a past to flee. The streets of Willow Creek were busy with mid-morning activity as they made their way back to their horses. Katherine was so absorbed in her thoughts that she nearly collided with a man rounding the corner of the general store. "Pardon me," she began automatically, then froze as recognition dawned. The tall man with the scarred cheek, Joe Hawkins, one of Blackstone's men, stared at her with equal shock before his face twisted into a menacing grin. Well, well," he drawled, "if it ain't the runaway bride herself." Adam stepped between them instantly, his hand moving to his holstered revolver. "Move along, Hawkins." Hawkins' eyes narrowed. "Gallagher, should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Boss is mighty upset about losing his property." "Miss Greene isn't property," George said coldly, moving to flank Katherine. "That's between her and the boss," Hawkins replied, his eyes never leaving Katherine's face. "He wants what's his." "You tell Blackstone that Miss Greene is under the protection of the Double G and the town of Willow Creek," Adam said, his voice deadly quiet. "If he comes near her again, he'll regret it." Hawkins sneered. "Big talk from a cowboy. Is there a problem here?" Sheriff Wilson's voice cut through the tension as he approached from the direction of his office. Hawkins forced a smile. "No problem, Sheriff. Just greeting old friends." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Miss Greene, I'll be sure to tell the boss you're doing well. He'll be real interested to know you're teaching in town now." With that parting threat, he sauntered away, leaving Katherine trembling with renewed fear. "Don't let him rattle you," Sheriff Wilson advised, though his own expression was troubled. "Blackstone's smart enough not to try anything in town. But the school is isolated," Katherine said quietly, "and I'd be alone there much of the day." The sheriff nodded grimly. "I'll increase patrols around the school." and perhaps we can arrange for someone to escort you to and from the Double G, at least initially." "I'll do it," Adam volunteered immediately. "My work takes me near town most days anyway." George nodded approvingly. "That's settled then. Kate will stay at the ranch and teach in town, with proper protection at all times." Katherine wanted to protest that she didn't need constant guarding, that she couldn't build a life around fear. But the memory of Blackstone's rage and Hawkins' threatening smile kept her silent. For now, at least, she would accept their protection. The encounter cast a shadow over what should have been a triumphant day, but Katherine was determined not to let fear rule her. As they rode back to the Double G, she focused on planning her first lessons and organizing the schoolroom, refusing to dwell on Hawkins' threat. Word spread quickly through the territory about Katherine's appointment as Willow Creek's teacher, and the circumstances of her escape from Blackstone. To her surprise, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Women from neighboring ranches and farms arrived at the Double G bearing gifts, books for the schoolhouse, fabric for new dresses, preserves, and baked goods. Each visitor shared their own stories of Blackstone's cruelty or arrogance, creating an unexpected sisterhood that strengthened Katherine's resolve. The week passed in a flurry of preparation. Katherine worked with Martha to sew appropriate teaching dresses, organized donated school supplies, and spent hours poring over the few textbooks available. Adam rode with her to town daily, helping repair broken desks and shelves in the schoolhouse, replacing cracked window glass, and ensuring the building was secure. During these work sessions, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy. There was a steadiness to Adam that soothed her lingering anxieties. He didn't press for conversation, but responded thoughtfully when she initiated it. By small degrees, she learned his story. Raised in Texas by a hard-working widow, left home at 16 after his mother remarried a cruel man, drifted through odd jobs until finding his place at the Double G. "I understand now why you said I'd never go back there," Katherine remarked one afternoon as they sorted donated books. "To Blackstone's, I mean. You know what it's like to escape a bad situation." Adam paused, a primer in his hands. "Different circumstances, but yes. I recognize that look, the one that says you're watching every shadow, expecting the worst to follow you. Does it ever go away, that feeling?" He considered her question carefully. "Not entirely, but it fades. You build something new, something better, and eventually that becomes your reality instead of the old fears." Katherine shelved a mathematics textbook. "I hope you're right." "Miss Greene, Kate," Adam said, using her familiar name for the first time, "you're already building something new. This school, these children who need you. That's your future, not Blackstone." She met his gaze, struck by the quiet certainty in his blue eyes. "Thank you, Adam, for everything." A slight flush colored his tanned cheeks, just speaking the truth. On Sunday evening, the night before school was to begin, Katherine sat at Martha's kitchen table putting the finishing touches on name cards for her students. Despite the nervous flutter in her stomach, she felt more prepared and purposeful than she had in months. A knock at the front door interrupted her concentration. Voices murmured in the entryway before George appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression grave. "Kate, Sheriff Wilson's here. Blackstone's making threats." Sheriff Wilson removed his hat as he entered the kitchen. "Evening, Miss Greene. Sorry to disturb you, but I thought you should know. Blackstone's been drinking heavily in town today, telling anyone who'll listen that you stole from him, and that he means to reclaim his property, as he puts it." Katherine's hands tightened around the pencil she held. "Has he actually done anything?" "Not yet. I warned him I'd lock him up if he caused trouble, but—" The sheriff sighed. Thing is, Billy Ray, that young redhead who helped abduct you, he came to me privately. Says he's willing to testify against Blackstone, admit to the kidnapping, but he's scared. Wants assurance he won't hang. George leaned forward. Can you promise him that? Territory judge arrives next month. I can recommend leniency in exchange for testimony, but no guarantees. Sheriff Wilson looked directly at Katherine. With his testimony, we could put Blackstone away for years. What do you need from me? Katherine asked. Nothing yet. Just be careful. I'm concerned Blackstone might try something desperate if he suspects Billy's turning on him. He stood. I've arranged for Deputy Harris to keep watch on the schoolhouse tomorrow. And I'd advise against traveling alone for the time being. After the sheriff left, Katherine stared at the name cards, her earlier confidence evaporating. Perhaps I shouldn't start teaching tomorrow. If there's danger to the children, Blackstone's a coward, George said firmly. He won't attack a schoolhouse in broad daylight, and giving in to his threats just proves his methods work. George is right, Martha added. The whole community's watching. This is your chance to show Blackstone he doesn't control you. Katherine nodded slowly. You're right. I can't let fear dictate my life. She gathered her materials. I should get some rest before tomorrow. As she climbed the stairs, she heard Adam's voice from the porch, returning from his evening rounds. Something in his steady tone reassured her. With the support of people like the Gordons and Adam Gallagher, perhaps she truly could build a new life here, one where Blackstone was just an unpleasant memory. The first day of school dawned clear and cool, the sky a perfect Wyoming blue that seemed to promise good things ahead. Katherine dressed carefully in her new navy skirt and white blouse, her hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat. She smoothed her hands over the fabric, hardly recognizing the confident woman in Martha's mirror compared to the broken fugitive of just 2 weeks ago. Downstairs, she found Adam waiting by the door, his usual work clothes replaced by clean denims and his newest shirt. He'd even trimmed his beard, she noticed with a flutter of appreciation. Ready for your big day, Miss Teacher? He asked, a gentle smile softening his features. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied, accepting the lunch pail Martha handed her. You'll do wonderfully, Martha assured her. Those children are lucky to have you. The ride to town was peaceful, the morning landscape stunning in its vast beauty. Adam kept the conversation light, pointing out landmarks and sharing amusing stories about local characters she might encounter. Most of your students will be ranch children, he explained. Tough but respectful if you earn it. The Gordon boys, Jake and Tyler, will be there. They're good kids, just spirited. Katherine appreciated his efforts to distract her from thoughts of Blackstone, though the occasional glances he cast at the surrounding terrain revealed his vigilance. They arrived at the schoolhouse to find several children already waiting outside with their parents, excitement evident on their young faces. Deputy Harris tipped his hat from his position near the hitching post, his presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the threat still looming. Miss Greene, Mayor Thompson bustled forward. Welcome, welcome. Parents, children, our new teacher has arrived. The next minutes passed in a whirlwind of introductions. Katherine met farm wives and ranch hands, shopkeepers and their spouses, each presenting children of varying ages who regarded her with expressions ranging from shy curiosity to open assessment. We're mighty grateful you're here, Mrs. Jensen, a weathered woman with kind eyes told her. My Sally's been desperate for proper schooling. I'll do my very best, Katherine promised, smiling at the solemn-faced 8-year-old clutching her mother's hand. When it came time to begin, Katherine found herself suddenly reluctant to part from Adam's reassuring presence. He seemed to sense her hesitation. I'll be back at 3 to escort you home, he said quietly. Deputy Harris won't leave his post. "You'll be just fine, Kate," she nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Adam." As she watched him ride away, Katherine took a deep breath and turned to her waiting pupils. "Children, shall we go inside and begin our adventure?" The school day passed in a blur of assessments, introductions, and establishing routines. Katherine discovered the children's education levels varied widely, from those who could barely recognize letters to a few who had advanced reading skills. By noon, she had formulated a plan to group students by ability rather than strictly by age, allowing each child to progress at their own pace. The Gordon boys, Jake and Tyler, proved to be bright but restless, clearly more comfortable on horseback than behind desks. Katherine made a mental note to incorporate more physical activity into their lessons, perhaps using the outdoors as a classroom when weather permitted. At 3 o'clock, she dismissed the children with their first simple homework assignments. As promised, Adam was waiting outside, exchanging easy conversation with Deputy Harris. The sight of him leaning against the hitching post, hat tipped back and sunlight highlighting the angles of his face, caused a warmth in Katherine's chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. "How was it?" he asked as she approached. "Wonderful," she replied honestly. "Challenging but wonderful. The children behaved." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Even the Gordon boys," Katherine laughed, "even them. Though I suspect their good behavior may not last past the novelty of a new teacher." Deputy Harris tipped his hat. "No sign of trouble, Miss Greene. I'll be here again tomorrow." "Thank you, Deputy. I appreciate your vigilance." As they rode back to the Double G, Katherine found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse and the comfort of Adam's company. She described her day in detail, the varying abilities of the students, her plans for teaching multiple levels simultaneously, the touching gift of wildflowers from shy little Sally Jensen. Adam listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest. It struck Katherine that few men of her acquaintance in Boston had ever shown such respect for her profession or opinions. "What?" Adam asked, noticing her sudden smile. "I was just thinking that misfortune sometimes leads to unexpected blessings," she replied. "If not for everything that happened, I might never have met the Gordons or you, or discovered how much I truly love teaching." Adam's expression softened. "I've thought the same. Not that I'm glad for what you suffered," he added quickly, "but that good can come from terrible circumstances." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Katherine felt a blush warm her cheeks. She looked away first, suddenly conscious of how comfortable she'd become in his presence. "Race you to that cottonwood," she said impulsively, nudging her horse forward before he could respond. Adam's surprised laugh followed her as he spurred his mount to catch up. By the time they reached the designated tree, they were both breathless with exertion and shared joy, a moment of pure freedom that seemed to wash away the shadows of the past. The next 2 weeks established a pattern. Katherine taught during the day while Deputy Harris kept watch. Adam escorted her to and from school, those daily rides becoming the highlight of her routine. In the evenings, she prepared lessons and gradually integrated herself into ranch life, even learning to help with simple chores despite Martha's protests that a schoolteacher shouldn't have to work after hours. Reports from Sheriff Wilson indicated that Blackstone had grown increasingly erratic, drinking heavily, firing workers without cause, and making vague threats. Yet he'd made no direct moves against Katherine or the Double G, which everyone took as a positive sign. Billy Ray, the young redhead, had provided a sworn statement about Katherine's abduction, though he remained in protective custody until the circuit judge arrived. With his testimony and Katherine's own account, Sheriff Wilson was confident they could secure a conviction against Blackstone. "Another month," he assured Katherine during a visit to the schoolhouse. "Judge Parker's strict but fair. Once we present the evidence, Blackstone will face serious time in territorial prison." The prospect of justice should have comforted Katherine, but instead it heightened her anxiety. Blackstone wasn't a man to accept defeat gracefully. The longer he went without acting, the more she feared what he might eventually do. Adam seemed to share her concern. Though he maintained a cheerful demeanor around her, she noticed his increased vigilance, the careful scanning of the horizon during their rides, the revolver always within reach, the quiet conversations with other ranch hands that ceased when she approached. One evening, returning from a particularly satisfying school day where young Sally Jensen had finally mastered her multiplication tables, Katherine broached the subject. "You're worried about Blackstone," she stated, rather than asked. Adam considered denying it, but evidently thought better of it. "Yes," he admitted. "It's not like him to be this patient. Sheriff Wilson says he's been asking questions around town about the ranch's routines, our defenses. You think he's planning something? I think a desperate man is capable of desperate acts." Adam's jaw tightened. "But we're ready for him. George has doubled the night watch, and every man on the Double G is armed." Katherine hesitated before asking her next question. "Do you think I should leave? Go back east until after the trial?" Adam reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Is that what you want?" The directness of his gaze made equivocation impossible. "No," she said honestly. "I've built something here with the children, with the community, with—" She faltered, suddenly aware of how personal her words had become. "With," Adam prompted softly. Katherine gathered her courage. "With you, Adam. I've come to value our friendship more than I can express." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment. Or was it hope? "Friendship," he repeated, the word weighted with unspoken meaning. Before Katherine could clarify or perhaps complicate matters further, the thunder of approaching hooves interrupted them. 3 riders from the Double G appeared over the rise, led by Jake Gordon, George's youngest son. "Adam," Jake called urgently. Blackstone's men were spotted near the north pasture. "Pa says to bring Miss Greene back by the creek trail, it's more protected." Adam's demeanor shifted instantly from the man engaged in a delicate personal conversation to the alert ranch foreman. "How many men?" "At least 5, all armed." "They shot at Sam when he approached them." "Is Sam hurt?" Jake shook his head. "Just grazed his arm. Pa's gathering the men." Adam turned to Katherine, his expression grave. "We need to get you back to the ranch house. Stay close to me." The peaceful afternoon had transformed into a nightmare with frightening speed. As they diverted to the creek trail, a less direct but more sheltered route through a dense copse of trees, Katherine struggled to control her rising panic. "This is my fault," she said, voice tight with fear. "I've brought this danger to all of you." "No," Adam said firmly. "This is Blackstone's doing, not yours. Never yours." They rode in tense silence, Jake and the other 2 ranch hands forming a protective formation around Katherine. The creek trail wound through a ravine, similar to the one where Adam had first found her, a coincidence that wasn't lost on either of them. They had nearly reached the point where the trail emerged into open rangeland, the Double G buildings visible in the distance, when the crack of rifle fire split the air. One of the ranch hands cried out, clutching his shoulder as he slumped in his saddle. "Ambush!" Adam shouted, drawing his revolver. "Kate, stay down!" Katherine pressed herself low against her horse's neck as more shots rang out from the ridge above them. Jake and the uninjured ranch hand returned fire while Adam maneuvered his horse alongside Katherine's. "When I say ride, you go straight for the ranch house," he instructed, voice eerily calm despite the chaos. "Don't stop for anything. The boys and I will cover you." "I can't leave you here," Katherine protested. "You can and you will." His eyes held hers for one intense moment. "I'll be right behind you, I promise." Before she could argue further, a figure appeared on the trail ahead. Joe Hawkins, Blackstone's scarred henchman, rifle aimed directly at them. "End of the line, Miss Greene," he called mockingly. "Boss wants a word with you." Adam raised his revolver, but Hawkins fired first. Katherine screamed as Adam jerked backward, blood blossoming on his left shoulder. Despite the wound, he maintained his seat and returned fire, forcing Hawkins to dive for cover. "Ride," Adam shouted to Katherine. "Now." This time she obeyed, spurring her horse forward as Jake and the other ranch hand provided covering fire. She heard Adam's horse thundering behind her, then more gunshots and a man's agonized cry, though whether friend or foe, she couldn't tell. The distance to the ranch house seemed infinite, though it couldn't have been more than half a mile. Katherine rode harder than she ever had, hair coming loose from its pins, skirts hiked scandalously high as she urged her mount to greater speed. She heard hoofbeats gaining on her and risked a glance back, terrified of seeing Hawkins or another of Blackstone's men. Instead, she saw Adam, face pale but determined, blood staining his shirt but still upright in the saddle. They burst into the ranch yard together, just as George and several armed ranch hands were mounting up to investigate the gunfire. Martha appeared on the porch, rifle in hand, her expression shifting from relief at seeing Katherine to alarm at Adam's bloodied state. "Blackstone's men," Adam managed as he slid from his saddle, grimacing in pain. "Ambushed us on the creek trail. Jake and Tom are still out there with Henry. He's wounded." George immediately organized a rescue party while Martha hurried to Adam's side. "Inside, both of you," she ordered. "I need to see that wound." Katherine dismounted on shaky legs, rushing to help support Adam as he swayed slightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears threatening. If you say this is your fault, I might have to get truly angry with you," Adam interrupted, his attempt at humor undermined by the pain in his voice. "And that would ruin my reputation as the even-tempered one around here." Despite everything, Katherine found herself smiling through her tears. Heaven forbid. Inside, Martha efficiently cut away Adam's bloodied shirt to reveal a bullet wound that, while bleeding freely, appeared to have gone clean through the fleshy part of his shoulder without hitting bone or major vessels. "You're lucky," Martha declared as she cleaned and bandaged the injury. "Few inches to the right, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Katherine assisted silently, handing Martha supplies and trying to ignore the way her heart had nearly stopped at the sight of Adam being shot. The realization of how deeply she cared for him had crystallized in that terrifying moment, a clarity she wasn't prepared to examine just yet. George returned with Jake, Tom, and the wounded Henry, reporting that Blackstone's men had fled after the exchange of gunfire. "Sheriff Wilson's been notified," he told them grimly. "He's gathering a posse to track them down." "Did you see Blackstone himself?" Adam asked from his position on the sofa, where Martha had insisted he rest. George shook his head. "Just his hired guns." "Though Jake says he spotted Billy Ray among them." "Billy Ray," Katherine exclaimed, "but he was supposed to be in protective custody." "Sheriff must have let him go," George speculated, "or he escaped." Adam's expression darkened. "Or the sheriff was paid off. Blackstone has money and connections." "Thomas Wilson's been sheriff for 15 years, Martha objected. "He wouldn't betray his oath." "Every man has his price," George said quietly, "or his weakness." The implications were chilling. If they couldn't trust the law, who could they trust? "What do we do now?" Katherine asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. George's answer was immediate and resolute. "We protect our own, double the guard, Arm everyone. No one travels alone, especially you, Kate. And my school, the children, will figure something out, Martha assured her. But for now, you stay here where we can keep you safe. That evening, as the ranch settled into an uneasy vigilance, Katherine found herself unable to sleep. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the ambush, Adam's injury, the betrayal by Billy Ray. She paced her room restlessly until the walls seemed to close in around her. Needing air, she slipped downstairs, careful not to wake the household. The front porch was occupied by an armed ranch hand keeping watch, but the kitchen door opened onto the back garden, which was enclosed by a low stone wall. Surely she could safely sit there for a few minutes to clear her head. The night air was cool and fragrant with late summer blossoms. Katherine wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and settled on a bench beneath a trellis of climbing roses. Above, stars scattered across the Wyoming sky in breathtaking profusion, a sight that still amazed her Eastern sensibilities. Couldn't sleep either. She startled at Adam's voice, turning to find him standing in the doorway, left arm in a sling but otherwise looking remarkably composed given the day's events. "You shouldn't be up," she admonished, though she was secretly glad for his company. "Martha's tinctures work wonders for pain," he replied, easing himself onto the bench beside her. "And like you, I found sleep elusive." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both gazing at the star-filled sky. "I keep thinking about what you asked earlier," Adam finally said. "About whether you should leave." Katherine's heart constricted. And I've been trying to be selfless to say yes, you should go somewhere safer until Blackstone is dealt with." He turned to face her, his expression visible in the moonlight. "But the truth is, Kate, the thought of you leaving tears at me something fierce." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Adam, I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "You've been through a terrible ordeal, and the last thing you need is some cowboy declaring his feelings when you're still finding your footing." "Is that what you're doing?" she asked softly. "Declaring your feelings?" Adam ran his good hand through his hair, a gesture of uncharacteristic nervousness. "Doing a poor job of it, apparently." He met her gaze directly. "Yes, Kate, I care for you more than I thought possible after knowing someone such a short time. And it terrifies me, because I can't offer you the kind of life you had in Boston, and I can't guarantee I can keep you safe from Blackstone." And Katherine silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "Adam Gallagher, do you think I want to return to the life I had in Boston?" He blinked in surprise. "I came west because I wanted something different, something meaningful, and despite everything, I've found it here." She lowered her hand but maintained his gaze. "I've found purpose in teaching, community with the Gordons and the people of Willow Creek, and something I never expected with you." "What did you find with me?" he asked, voice husky. Katherine gathered her courage. "A connection I've never felt before. A sense that I'm understood, respected, and cared for in a way that has nothing to do with convention or expectation." Adam's expression transformed with hope. "You feel it too, then?" "Yes," she admitted simply. "Though like you said, it seems impossible given how brief our acquaintance has been." A smile curved his lips. "Some things don't need time, Kate. Sometimes you just know." He reached out hesitantly, as if expecting her to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch sent warmth cascading through her. "I won't leave," Katherine decided aloud. "Not because of fear or Blackstone or anything else. This is where I belong now, with my students, with the Gordons, with—" She faltered, still not quite brave enough to say what her heart felt. Adam's smile deepened with understanding. "With me," he suggested softly. "With you," she confirmed, returning his smile. "Though what that means, precisely, I'm not entirely sure. It means we face whatever comes together, Adam said simply. It means I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe and see you happy. It means the crack of a rifle shot shattered the night, and Adam instinctively threw himself forward, knocking Katherine to the ground and covering her body with his own as splinters exploded from the bench where they'd been sitting. Inside, he shouted, pulling her up and pushing her toward the kitchen door as more shots rang out from beyond the garden wall. They tumbled into the kitchen as the house erupted into activity. George and Martha rushing downstairs, ranch hands grabbing weapons, shouts of alarm and organization. Blackstone, George demanded, rifle already in hand. Adam nodded grimly, still sheltering Katherine with his body despite his injured shoulder. At least one shooter beyond the south wall. George turned to two of his men. Circle around, see if you can flank them. The rest of you, defensive positions. He glanced at Katherine's pale face. Martha, get Kate to the cellar. It's the safest place if they breach the house. I won't hide while everyone else is in danger, Katherine protested. You'll do as you're told, Martha said firmly, already guiding her toward the cellar door. Your presence will only distract the men from what needs doing. Adam's eyes met Katherine's as Martha led her away. Stay safe, he mouthed. For me. The cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and preserved foods. Martha lit a lantern, casting long shadows across the shelves of canned goods and sacks of flour. This is my fault, Katherine whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as gunfire continued overhead. I should never have come here, never involved all of you in my problems. Martha's weathered hand gripped Katherine's shoulder firmly. Stop that nonsense right now. You're family to us now, and family stands together. But Adam was shot today, and now everyone's in danger, and Adam would take 100 bullets if it meant keeping you safe, Martha interrupted. That man's been half in love with you since he found you in that ravine. Katherine stared at the older woman in surprise. You knew. A knowing smile crossed Martha's face. Child, I've been watching young love bloom for 40 years. I recognize the signs. Before Katherine could respond, the cellar door opened and Adam appeared, his expression grim but resolute. They're retreating, he reported. Sam and Jake are following at a distance to make sure they don't circle back. Anyone hurt? Martha asked anxiously. Few scrapes from broken glass, nothing serious. He looked directly at Katherine. You're all right, she nodded, relief flooding through her at the sight of him unharmed despite the renewed fighting. Martha looked between them and made a show of straightening her apron. I should check on George. You two have words to finish, I expect. With that remarkably perceptive statement, she ascended the cellar stairs, leaving them alone. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the interrupted conversation in the garden hanging between them. I meant what I said out there, Adam finally broke the silence. About facing things together. Katherine stepped closer to him. So did I. She hesitated, then added softly, I'm beginning to think that surviving Blackstone was just the first chapter of a much longer story, one I'd very much like to write with you, Adam Gallagher. Something in his expression shifted, a vulnerability appearing beneath his usual quiet strength. Kate. He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. I know this isn't the right time or place with bullets still cooling in the walls above us, but I need to say it plain. I'm falling in love with you. The simple declaration stole Katherine's breath. Despite the cellar's coolness, warmth spread through her chest. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, the admission both terrifying and exhilarating. And I don't think there's ever a wrong time to speak truth like that. Adam's smile was radiant despite the circumstances. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "May I kiss you, Katherine Greene?" In answer, she closed the remaining distance between them, pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Adam's good arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Katherine felt as though something essential had clicked into place, a sense of rightness, of coming home. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Adam's eyes held a mixture of wonder and determination. "We'll end this, Kate. Blackstone won't haunt us forever." "I know," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Together we'll find a way." The next morning brought Sheriff Wilson to the Double G, his expression troubled as he surveyed the bullet-riddled south wall of the house. "Blackstone's gone too far," he declared. "Attacking a homestead like this, it's beyond the pale, even for him." "What about Billy Ray?" George demanded. "He was supposed to be in your protective custody." The sheriff looked genuinely baffled. "He still is, far as I know. Locked him in the back cell myself before riding out here." Adam and Katherine exchanged glances. "Then who was the redhead Jake saw with Blackstone's men?" Adam asked. "Don't know," Wilson admitted, "but I intend to find out. In the meantime," he turned to Katherine, "Miss Greene, I think it's best if you don't hold school for a few days. Blackstone's clearly desperate, and I won't risk the children's safety." Katherine nodded reluctantly. She hated the disruption to her students' education, but couldn't argue with the sheriff's logic. "What's your plan, Thomas?" George pressed. "We can't just sit here waiting for Blackstone's next move." Sheriff Wilson adjusted his hat grimly. "I'm riding to the territorial capital today to request additional deputies. Once they arrive, we'll move on Blackstone's ranch in force. If the circuit judge were here, I'd have a warrant already." "And until then?" Adam asked, his hand finding Katherine's. "Until then, you stay vigilant. I've got men watching the roads, and I've telegraphed descriptions of Blackstone and his known associates to neighboring towns." The sheriff's eyes lingered on their joined hands. "Congratulations are in order, it seems." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Adam's grip remained steady. "Thank you, Sheriff," he said simply. "We appreciate your efforts." After Wilson departed, the Double G settled into a state of armed vigilance. Ranch work continued, cattle still needed tending, horses still required exercise, but always with guards posted and weapons at the ready. Katherine found herself confined to the ranch house and its immediate surroundings, a restriction that chafed despite her understanding of its necessity. To combat restlessness, she organized informal lessons for the Gordon boys and several other ranch children whose parents worked at the Double G. The dining room table became her makeshift classroom, and she discovered that teaching in this intimate setting allowed for more personalized instruction than the town schoolhouse permitted. Adam divided his time between ranch duties and Katherine's side, his injured shoulder healing well under Martha's careful ministrations. The tension of Blackstone's threat hung over them, yet paradoxically, their relationship deepened in the midst of this uncertainty. Evening conversations stretched late into the night, each sharing hopes and dreams, fears and memories with increasing openness. 3 days passed without incident, no sign of Blackstone or his men, no word from Sheriff Wilson. The extended quiet was both reassuring and nerve-wracking, like the stillness before a storm. On the 4th morning, a rider approached the ranch at dawn, Billy Ray himself, hands raised high to show he came in peace. George and Adam met him at the perimeter, rifles trained on the young redhead until they were satisfied he was alone and unarmed. "What do you want?" George demanded as Billy dismounted slowly. "Need to talk to Miss Greene," Billy replied, his youthful face haggard with exhaustion. "Got information about Blackstone." "You've got nerve coming here," Adam said coldly. "Last we heard, you were riding with Blackstone's men again. Billy shook his head vehemently. Wasn't me, I swear, been locked up in town the whole time. Sheriff Wilson can vouch for that. After a tense discussion, they escorted Billy to the house, keeping him under careful watch. Katherine agreed to speak with him, but only with Adam and George present. Billy twisted his hat nervously in his hands as he faced Katherine across the kitchen table. Miss Greene, I know you got no reason to trust me, seeing as how I helped Blackstone take you in the first place. I was wrong for that, and I'm sorry. Katherine studied the young man barely more than a boy, really. Why are you here, Billy? Blackstone's planning something big, he blurted. Overheard the sheriff talking about it when he thought I was sleeping. Blackstone's got a dozen men coming in from Colorado, gunmen, hired killers. They're aiming to attack the Double G in force, day after tomorrow. And why would you warn us? George asked skeptically. Billy's eyes darted between them. Because I'm trying to make things right, and because he hesitated. Because Joe Hawkins came to the jail yesterday, tried to bribe Deputy Collins to let me out, said Blackstone wanted me back. And this concerns you why? Adam pressed. Because Hawkins said once they dealt with you folks, I'd be next, said Blackstone couldn't risk me testifying. Billy's voice shook slightly. I may be young, but I ain't stupid. Blackstone's cleaning house, getting rid of anyone who could talk against him. The trio exchanged worried glances. If Billy was telling the truth, they faced a much larger threat than anticipated. Where's Sheriff Wilson now? George asked. Still hasn't returned from the capital, Billy answered. Deputy Collins is in charge, but he's got just 2 men besides himself. Adam leaned forward. You said gunmen from Colorado. Any names, descriptions? Just one name, fellow called Dixon. Blackstone said he was bringing 5 men of his own. Billy hesitated. There's something else. Blackstone's been talking crazy, saying once you're all gone, he'll burn the schoolhouse next. Says he wants to erase any trace of Miss Greene from the territory. Katherine felt ice flood her veins at this revelation. Blackstone's obsession had expanded beyond her to encompass everything and everyone connected to her. George stood abruptly. We need to warn the town, get the families prepared. If what Billy says is true, we don't have much time, Adam agreed. He turned to Katherine. Kate, I think you should. Don't say leave, she interrupted firmly. This is my home now, and I won't be driven from it. Adam's expression softened with pride despite the gravity of the situation. I was going to say you should help Martha organize supplies. If we're facing a siege, we'll need food, water, and medical provisions. Katherine nodded, feeling slightly foolish for her assumption. Of course. George dispatched riders to neighboring ranches and to Willow Creek, warning of the impending attack and requesting assistance. The response was immediate and heartening. By nightfall, over 20 additional men had arrived at the Double G, bringing weapons, ammunition, and supplies. Mayor Thompson himself came, assuring Katherine that the town stood with her. Willow Creek protects its own, he declared, and you're one of us now, Miss Greene. Billy Ray remained at the ranch, placed under guard but treated fairly in recognition of his warning. He provided what details he could about Blackstone's plans, though these were frustratingly vague. As darkness fell, the ranch resembled an armed camp more than a homestead. Men established defensive positions around the main house and barn, prepared fallback points, and organized rotating watches. Martha and Katherine, along with several ranch wives who'd arrived with their husbands, prepared food and organized medical supplies. In a brief moment of privacy as they filled canteens from the well, Adam pulled Katherine aside, his expression grave yet tender. Kate, he began, voice low and urgent, I need to ask you something, and it may seem strange given the circumstances. She set down her canteen, giving him her full attention. What is it? Adam took both her hands in his. "If we survive what's coming when we survive it," he corrected himself firmly, "will you consider becoming my wife?" The question caught Katherine completely by surprise. They'd acknowledged their deepening feelings, shared kisses and dreams, but hadn't spoken explicitly of marriage. Yet as the initial shock faded, she realized the rightness of it. This man who had rescued her, protected her, respected her, and loved her through extraordinary circumstances was offering a lifetime of partnership. "Adam," she said softly, "are you proposing to me on the eve of battle?" A smile touched his lips despite the tension surrounding them. "I suppose I am. Not the most romantic timing, I'll grant you, but—" His grip on her hands tightened slightly. "Facing what we are, I didn't want to leave anything unsaid between us." Katherine stepped closer, her heart full. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Adam Gallagher, after we've sent Edgar Blackstone packing for good." The joy that transformed his face was worth every hardship she'd endured to reach this moment. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised future and forever, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. "I love you, Katherine Greene," he murmured against her hair. "And whatever happens tomorrow, know that finding you has been the greatest blessing of my life." "I love you too," she replied, memorizing the feeling of safety in his arms. "And we will get through this together." The next day passed in tense preparation. Deputy Collins arrived with his 2 men, apologetic that the sheriff hadn't yet returned, but determined to uphold the law. Billy Ray was formally placed in the deputy's custody, but remained at the ranch where he could be better protected. As night fell without incident, some began to wonder if Billy's information had been false, or if Blackstone had somehow learned of their preparations and changed his plans. The Double G maintained vigilance, however, no one willing to risk lowering their guard. Dawn broke clear and cold, the first hints of autumn touching the air. Katherine, who had slept little, helped Martha prepare a hearty breakfast for the defenders. As she carried a pot of coffee to the men stationed in the barn, she paused to admire the sunrise painting the eastern sky in brilliant golds and pinks. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Adam's voice came from behind her as he stepped from the house. "No matter what happens, the sun still rises." Katherine leaned into him as his arm encircled her waist. "It reminds me that some things are constant, even when everything else changes." "Like my love for you," he said simply. She smiled up at him, struck by how natural it felt to be planning a future with this man she'd known for such a short time. Sometimes, she reflected, the heart recognized its match instantly, needing no lengthy courtship to confirm what it already knew. The peaceful moment shattered as a sentry's shout rang out from the north fence line. "Riders coming! At least 15 men!" The ranch exploded into activity. Women and children hurried to the root cellar. Men took their assigned positions. Weapons were checked one final time. Adam pressed a quick, fierce kiss to Katherine's lips before guiding her toward the house. "Stay with Martha," he instructed. "If things go badly, they won't," she interrupted, squeezing his hand. "But be careful, Adam. I expect to collect on that proposal." His smile flashed briefly before he turned, moving swiftly to his defensive position near the main gate. Katherine joined Martha in the kitchen, which had been designated as their field hospital. Through the window, she could see the approaching riders, a grim-faced collection of men led by a figure she recognized with a chill. Edgar Blackstone himself. The riders halted just beyond rifle range. After a tense moment, Blackstone urged his horse forward alone, stopping halfway between his men and the ranch. "Gordon," he shouted, "send out the woman and we'll leave your ranch standing." George stepped into view from his position behind a water trough, rifle ready. Miss Greene isn't property to be handed over, Blackstone. She's under our protection and the laws. The law. Blackstone laughed harshly. Sheriff Wilson won't be riding to your rescue today or any day. Had a nasty accident on his way back from the Capitol. This ominous statement sent a ripple of concern through the defenders. Deputy Collins stepped forward, his young face determined despite his obvious fear. I represent the law here now, Blackstone. I'm ordering you and your men to disarm and surrender. Blackstone's response was to draw his revolver and fire a single shot that kicked up dust at the deputy's feet. That's my answer to your law, boy. The standoff stretched for several excruciating minutes, neither side willing to initiate the bloodbath that would surely follow open conflict. Katherine watched from the window, heart pounding, as Adam conferred quietly with George and several other men. Suddenly, movement caught her eye not from Blackstone's forces, but from the eastern ridge behind them. A line of riders appeared, at least 20 strong, moving at a controlled pace down the slope. At their head rode a familiar figure that made Katherine gasp in recognition. "Sheriff Wilson," Martha exclaimed beside her. "He's alive." The sheriff's posse effectively trapped Blackstone's men between two forces. Realizing his position had become untenable, Blackstone wheeled his horse, barking orders to his men who were already shifting nervously at this unexpected development. What happened next unfolded with horrifying speed. Rather than surrender, Hawkins and several others opened fire on the sheriff's men, while Blackstone himself spurred his horse directly toward the ranch house, clearly intent on reaching Katherine even in defeat. The air filled with gunfire as both sides engaged. Adam and George concentrated their fire on Blackstone, but he rode low over his horse's neck, making himself a difficult target. He crashed through the garden gate, dismounting in a fluid motion and charging toward the kitchen door with single-minded purpose. Katherine backed away from the window as Martha grabbed the shotgun they'd kept ready. But before either woman could reach the door, it burst open, revealing Blackstone, his face contorted with rage and a revolver in his hand. "You've cost me everything," he snarled at Katherine. "If I can't have you, no one will." He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Martha discharged the shotgun. The blast caught Blackstone in the shoulder, spinning him around but not stopping him. He staggered, turning his gun toward Martha now. Katherine acted on instinct, grabbing a cast iron skillet from the stove and swinging it with all her strength. The heavy pan connected with Blackstone's head with a sickening thud, dropping him unconscious to the floor just as Adam and George burst through the door behind him. Outside, the shooting had mostly stopped. Sheriff Wilson's voice could be heard giving orders as Blackstone's surviving men surrendered. Adam rushed to Katherine, pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes wild with fear as he checked her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though she was trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. "Martha wounded him, and I hit him with a skillet." Adam's expression transformed from concern to amazement, then pride. "Remind me never to cross you in the kitchen," he said, the jest breaking the tension. Sheriff Wilson entered a moment later, looking battered but very much alive. "Blackstone claimed I'd had an accident," he explained grimly. "His men ambushed me on the road back, but they underestimated how hard this old lawman is to kill. Left me for dead, which gave me the chance to gather every badge and volunteer between here and the Capitol." Blackstone was taken into custody, along with Joe Hawkins and the surviving gunmen. The casualties had been mercifully light considering the potential for disaster. 2 of the sheriff's posse wounded, one of Blackstone's hired guns killed when he refused to surrender, and various minor injuries among the Double G defenders. As the prisoners were led away, Katherine stood on the porch beside Adam, watching her former captor's defeated figure slouched in the saddle of a sheriff's horse. "It's really over," she said, still hardly able to believe it. Adam's arm tightened around her waist. "Yes, it is. Blackstone will face the judge for kidnapping, attempted murder, and a host of other charges. With Billy Ray's testimony and the events of today, he'll never threaten anyone again." Katherine turned to face her fiancé, taking in his beloved features, the strength in his jaw, the kindness in his eyes, the smile that seemed reserved just for her. "When I ran from his house that night, I never imagined I'd find all this: a home, a purpose, a family. You. And I never imagined finding you in that ravine would change my life forever," Adam replied, brushing a gentle thumb across her cheek. "But here we are, she echoed softly, ready to begin our chapter." 1 month later, on a perfect autumn afternoon, Katherine Greene became Katherine Gallagher in a simple ceremony at the Willow Creek Church. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with the residents of the Double G and representatives from neighboring ranches. Even Sheriff Wilson attended, bringing news that Edgar Blackstone had been sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. Katherine wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and the town's seamstress had worked on secretly, while Adam looked uncommonly dapper in a new suit that George insisted was about time he owned anyway. The Gordon boys served as groomsmen, and little Sally Jensen proudly scattered wildflower petals before the bride. As Katherine and Adam spoke their vows, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The terror and trauma of her captivity would always be a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she was shaped by what came after: the courage to rebuild, the community that embraced her, the students who looked to her for guidance, and the man who now pledged his life to hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Adam's lips met hers to the cheers and applause of their friends and neighbors, Katherine felt the final pieces of her new life lock into place. The nightmare was truly over. The dream was just beginning. The newlyweds established their home in a snug cabin on Double G land, close enough to Willow Creek for Katherine to continue teaching, but connected to the ranch where Adam had found his purpose. With George's blessing, Adam took on increasing responsibility, positioned to eventually manage the operation. As the older man contemplated retirement, Katherine's school flourished under her guidance. When news of her ordeal and triumph spread through the territory, enrollment actually increased, with families from outlying areas sending children to board in town, rather than miss the opportunity to learn from the remarkable teacher warrior of Willow Creek, as one Denver newspaper dramatically dubbed her. That winter, gathered before the fire in their cabin, Adam presented Katherine with a gift: a small, leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For recording our chapters," he explained as she ran her fingers over the fine craftsmanship. "All the adventures yet to come." Katherine smiled, thinking of how far she had traveled: not just the physical distance from Boston to Wyoming, but the emotional journey from captive to survivor to beloved wife and respected teacher. "Our next chapter might need a larger book," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat stomach. "We'll need room for one more character, arriving next summer." Adam's expression of joyous disbelief was everything she'd hoped for. As he gathered her into his arms, murmuring words of love and wonder against her hair, Katherine Greene Gallagher silently thanked the twist of fate that had led her to escape from her captor's house and into the arms of a cowboy who'd promised she'd never go back there, a promise that had blossomed into a lifetime of love in the wild western landscape she now called home.